there, I'm Beth from the West Dallas Public Library, and welcome to another episode of True Stories for Kids. Today, I'm going to read a biography about J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of the book The Hobbit and the trilogy The Lord of the Rings. Our book today is called John Ronald's Dragons. John Ronald's Dragons. The Story of J.R.R. Tolkien by Caroline McAlister, illustrated by Eliza Wheeler. John Ronald was a boy who loved horses and trees, and strange-sounding words. But most of all, John Ronald loved dragons. Dragons that flew through the clouds, dragons that breathed sizzling flames, dragons that tied themselves in knots, dragons that wore shining scales, and dragons that guarded ancient treasures. John Ronald fed sugar cubes to the milkman's horse. He swung from the branches of beech trees with his little brother. His mother read him stories about brave knights who battled dragons. But in Safe Sarhole, a small town in Britain's Midlands, no actual dragons flew through the clouds, only geese, and sometimes a hawk. At school, John Ronald made good friends. The boys held secret parties in the library with tea and biscuits. The librarian scolded them for dropping crumbs on her books. They acted in plays, and they played rugby. They sketched pictures and made jokes. But at school, there were no dragons that breathed sizzling flames, only the headmaster, who smoked a pipe. On vacations from school, John Ronald visited his cousin Mary. They made up their own languages. And this meant, there was an old man who said, "How can I possibly carry my cow? For if I was to ask it to get in my basket, it would make such a terrible row." The grown-ups shrugged their shoulders. At his cousin's house, there were no dragons, tied up in knots. Only John Ronald and Mary, who tied themselves in knots, laughing at their private language. Then, John Ronald's mother died. He and his brother moved in with their aunt. She didn't like boys, and her house was cold and lonely. At night, John Ronald dreamed of exploring a steamy dragon's den. But in the morning, when he walked into his aunt's kitchen, nothing warmed the room. Only a thin wisp of steam rose from his lumpy oatmeal. On the way from his aunt's house to school, John Ronald stopped at the church. There he helped Father Francis perform the morning mass. He carried a cross up the aisle. He rang the altar bell. Of course, he didn't find any dragons at the church, but he did find stillness, beauty, and peace. After some time, John Ronald moved to a boarding house. There he met a girl with bright eyes and shining black hair. He fell in love and asked her to marry him, and she agreed. For a while, he forgot to look for dragons with shining scales. He only had eyes for Edith as she played scales on her piano. All of a sudden, the whole world went to war. John Ronald had to go too. He trudged through the mud. He slept in a trench. He heard loud guns. For, as far as he could see in any direction, war had destroyed all the green trees. He tried to shut out the noises of war by making up another imaginary language. It didn't work. It was then that he most needed dragons. But of course, there were no dragons on the battlefield, only ugly machines belching flames. When John Ronald came home, he got a job teaching at the University of Oxford. He gave lectures, he went to meetings, he tutored students. He graded many, many exams. When he could escape from his work, he ate fish and chips at the pub with his friends. Sometimes they read each other stories they had written. But there were still no dragons guarding treasure, only silent gargoyles guarding buildings. Then, one day, when John Ronald was grading exams, he came to a blank page. He wrote on the page, "In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit." He didn't yet know what a hobbit was. It wasn't a dragon, but he followed it anyway. On school holidays in winter, when the fire was lit and the tea kettle was whistling, John Ronald told his children stories about the hobbit, who, by the way, he named Bilbo Baggins. He gave Bilbo hairy feet. Bilbo lived in a cozy underground home in the Shire. But most important of all, Bilbo led John Ronald over the misty mountains. Through the Mirkwood Forest. And across the long lake to the base of the Lonely Mountain. There at last, John Ronald found his dragon. And deep under the Lonely Mountain, there still lives a dragon that flies through the clouds and breathes sizzling flames. A dragon that wears shining scales and guards ancient treasure. A dragon named Smaug. The end, except for our author's and illustrator's note. I'll read the author's note today. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien was born in South Africa in 1892. When John Ronald was 3, his mother took him to England for a visit. While they were in England, his father died suddenly of rheumatic fever. Tolkien's mother was left to raise him and his younger brother on her own. She settled in the small village of Sarhol near Birmingham. In Sarhol, Tolkien first read the story of Sigurd in Andrew Lang's The Red Fairy book, where he met the fearsome dragon Fafnir. He also fell in love with the strange Welsh words he saw written on passing train cars and made up imaginary languages with his cousin. Tolkien's happy childhood was shattered when his mother died of diabetes. He was just 12 years old. At first, he and his brother moved in with his aunt, the widow of his mother's younger brother. His mother had appointed a Catholic priest, Father Francis Morgan, to be his guardian, and Father Francis paid the aunt to take care of the boys. However, she offered the orphaned boys no affection. One day, they returned from school to discover that she had burned their mother's belongings. Father Francis then moved them to a boarding house. At King Edward's School in Birmingham, Tolkien's close circle of friends helped him cope with the loneliness of being an orphan. They called themselves the TCBS, which stood for the Tea Club and Barrovian Society. The name came from their drinking tea at Barrow's stores and also from holding illicit tea parties in the school library. Tolkien met the love of his life, Edith Bratt, at the boarding house where he lived in Birmingham. She was an orphan like him. Father Francis worried that she would distract Tolkien from his studies. After all, he could not attend university unless he won a scholarship. Father Francis forbade Tolkien to see Edith or write her for 2 years. Tolkien obeyed, but when the 2 years were up, he immediately proposed. They married before he left for France to fight in the First World War. As a member of the Lancashire Fusiliers, Tolkien fought in the Battle of the Somme, where Britain lost over 400,000 men. 2 of his closest friends from the TCBS died there. After the war, Tolkien became a renowned professor of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford University. He met with other literary friends, including C.S. Lewis, at pubs around Oxford. They called their informal society the Inklings. Tolkien and his wife had 4 children. When I visited Oxford, I was delighted to discover that Tolkien sent his sons to the Dragon School, a progressive school in North Oxford that is still in existence. In 1936, Tolkien began writing The Hobbit to read to his children during winter break. When he submitted it to the publisher, George Allen, and Unwin, Stanley Unwin gave the manuscript to his 10-year-old son, Rayner, to review. Rayner wrote, "This book, with the help of maps, does not need any illustrations. It is good and should appeal to all children between the ages of 5 and 7. The Hobbit was published in 1937. Prompted by its worldwide success, Tolkien proceeded to write the Lord of the Rings trilogy. In writing a biography of J.R.R. Tolkien for children, I wanted to capture the life of his imagination. After all, he lived quietly. It was in his imagination that he traveled far and took extraordinary risks. In spite of the international success he garnered from his writing, Tolkien remained in England until his death in 1973. He maintained that he was, except for his size, in every way, a hobbit. I hope you enjoyed the story of J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Today's activity, to go along with the story of J.R.R. Tolkien, is we're making our own dragon eggs. We have kits available at the library while supplies last, so give us a call to see if there's any available, but we'll have those ready to give out until they're gone. But you can do this one with supplies you might have at home. So in the kit, there will be a little bit of air dry clay. Air dry clay, it does work better than just using regular clay or baking clay or Play-Doh. So I would recommend that. There is a plastic egg in there, and then there's a baggie with some jewels and shells and other things to decorate. Now, this is my dragon egg. As you can see, it has started to hatch. I did not use the air dry clay. I used, I think it was just the regular modeling clay, but it wasn't air dry. But I did let it sit for a long time, so it is hard, but it's a little more fragile. So I made sure to get you guys the air dry clay. And if you're gonna do this at home, so everyone got a plastic egg in the kit. If you don't have a plastic egg, you can use tin foil. The core, the center inside of my egg here is tin foil. I did not have a plastic egg when I made this. So you can just ball up some tin foil, and what you're gonna do with either the tin foil or the plastic egg is cover it with the air dry clay or whatever clay you have. You can, obviously, look, you can use whatever you have, just like I did. So you're gonna flatten out your clay and cover your egg as best you can, and make your dragon egg. Make it whatever shape, or as close to whatever shape you want it to look like for your dragon. Then all you do is you take gems, you can take seashells. If you want like an earth dragon, it might be cool to have like grass and twigs and little pebbles, and you just push them right into your egg. You push it in, and then once it's dry, they should stay. So you might want to think about what kind of dragon is going to hatch from your egg and decorate it. There were some really neat ones on the internet of water dragons. And what they did was they put the seashells in, and then they took watercolors. So if you have watercolors at home, and then they painted their egg like a blue or turquoise color for more of a water oceany look. It was pretty neat. I did not paint mine. I pushed some sequins in. So these aren't even the jewels that are in the kits. I just pushed some sequins in. So if you have sequins at home, you can add that too. And if you want, you can even like push some designs using, I don't know if you have any special rollers, or you can even do designs with your fingernails or your fingerprints, and make little designs in the clay before it dries. Then you just let it sit and air dry, and it will harden into your very own dragon egg. Pretty cool. I hope you had fun with us this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new True Stories for Kids. Next time we will be learning about Katherine Johnson. I hope you had fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.